Companions, welcome. As you might know from my previous videos, I am now in the Quartier conservation area. I'm beginning to wander around in the bush. I've made a temporary camp and I'll be exploring from here. Before we continue, I would like to introduce you to Mesada. Mesada was my companion during the time I spent exploring the Quartier conservation area. It's always a huge problem finding someone that knows the bush, the veld, better than I do. But I was very lucky, and this was courtesy Stefan van Wyk. Now, Mesada is a true San, or a Bushman, as he prefers to call himself. He has lived in the area most of his life, and he is really living close to the bush. You can see he's a tiny person, and Mesada lives a simple life. When we were in camp, he would spend his time sitting by his fire on his haunches, like you can see here. I gave him a chair. I don't think he ever used the chair. Always sat on his haunches like this, either cooking or just staring into the coals or just staring into the bush. I introduced him to some of the food I brought along. Brought some maize meal and some tinned food, but he didn't know this kind of food at all. So I had to introduce it to him, and I ate with him to show that it's pleasant. It was quite pleasant, I must say. But he has simple habits. Here he's building a smoke. You can see how carefully he's doing this, taking his time, and then once he's formed the cigarette, then he lights it with his flintstone. At one point, he came to me and showed me his shoes. The soles had cracked across. So I fixed them for him using gasket material that I had in my spares kit. And this is what it looked like afterwards. Here they are drying in the sun. And it worked quite well. But it turned out Mesada didn't really need the shoes, because at one point we started tracking an eland of which we'd found very fresh spoor. And then he took off his shoes so that he could move more quietly. Here you can see him moving through the bush and how quietly he's actually moving with his shoes hung around his neck. Mesada and I spent about 2 weeks together. We hadn't been able to form any kind of bond. There was a very complicated language barrier. We ended up communicating by hand signs, and we would make drawings in the sand, and we would mimic the sounds that the animals made and the typical animal movements to each other. And we got along fairly well at that level. But there was nothing else, no other kind of communication or interaction. I was very privileged to have him. His bush knowledge was exceptional, and I learned quite a few things from him, confirmed many things I had been thinking, and generally found it wonderfully informative. There is a lot of research and documentation of nature, animals, plants, the bush in general. But there's also still a lot of information that is not recorded anywhere, but exists only in the heads of people like Mesada. And I have become, I would almost say, obsessed with gathering this kind of knowledge. And I'll be sharing some of what me and Mesada experienced with you in the coming stories. I'm looking forward to having you, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Good luck.